Hello, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this Oasis Connection, a TV ministry where we share about biblical principles and real-life principles. And today, we have such a special deal for you, because today we have special guests that are joining myself and my wife today on the set. And this couple, we've known them for several years. They are known as the pioneers of homeschooling. And just wait and be a part of it. Don't change the station, okay? Just be a part of this and you will really enjoy it. And then, you know what, can you just introduce them?
Yes.
I know I just...
We're just so delighted today to have with us Kirk and Beverly McCord, pioneers of the homeschool movement. So if you're there and you're a homeschooling family, go call another homeschooling family, because you're going to learn something from this amazing giants in the homeschool movement. And if you know someone, a neighbor, a friend, a colleague that wants to learn about homeschooling, they're thinking about homeschooling, because this is really the time that a lot of families do that, go ahead and give them a call. Tell them to tune in, because you're going to learn so much today. Isn't it a blessing to have them?
You know what? It's such a blessing, because, you know, I know some of you that know our stories know that we homeschool our children for 11 years. And we wouldn't have been successful without this couple, because God brought them into our lives at opportune time, at the right time. And they were able to guide us and to equip us with all that we needed to be successful as homeschool parents. So like my wife said, call everybody that you know that are homeschooling, planning to homeschool, desire to homeschool, or even have relatives that are homeschooling. So I am telling you, whatever may be, any question that you may have is going to be answered. And any type of doubt you have is going to be, you know, twatted today, okay? Yeah. Well, let's get right into it.
Yes, so Kirk and Beverly, thank you so much for joining us today. We're just so honored to have you and blessed to have you. We know that God has orchestrated today, this appointed time, for our viewers to get to learn from you and to have some of their questions answered. Can you begin just telling our viewers who you are, your family, your marriage, and we'll finish that, then we'll start our discussion on homeschooling.
Want me to start?
Yes, you start.
Well, my name is Kirk McCord, and my wife Beverly, and we were married as of yesterday 40 years. So we just had our anniversary.
Congratulations.
And as I always say to my younger friends, the first 40 years are the hardest, so just hang in there. Okay. So we have 4 children, ages 31 to 38, and we started the homeschooling, or at least investigating homeschooling, I would say, in 1982. So would you like to add anything more? Because you're the one that really had the idea.
Well, we did more than investigate. I actually started. I was so excited in 1982. I was struggling. I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and I was struggling. Should I put them in preschool, or the 2-year-old in preschool or not? Or Mother's Day out? And everyone on my street was sending them to Mother's Day out. So I tried that with the 2-year-old and the baby. But it didn't work out that well, because I had to wake the baby up to go and pick up the 2-year-old, and he wasn't that happy being away from home. Then when he turned 3, everyone was doing preschool. And I was wrestling with that decision. I went to a Christian bookstore, was talking to the owner, who was a friend, and she said, well, you don't have to put them in preschool. Have you thought about homeschooling? I said, what? She said, homeschooling. Here, read this book. It was a book by Dr. Raymond Moore, Better Late Than Early. I took it home, I read it. The Lord just hit me with a lightning bolt. We are going to homeschool our kids. This is the best for us. So that's how we got started.
So when you shared that with Kirk, how does he feel? What does he say? He just went along with it?
Well,
Well, I was skeptical at first because I was concerned that maybe we were not giving our children the right start in life. And being an educated professional myself, I wanted them to have the opportunity to go to the best schools. And but I trusted Beverly's judgment because I knew she could do it. I had no doubt she could homeschool if she really wanted to. So, and she explained the reasoning, and of course I was concerned at that time about what was going on in the public school system. And so from that standpoint, education aside, I just felt from the standpoint of the moral values that I thought we could instill better at home rather than send the child off when he's very young and subject to peer pressure.
You mentioned a while ago from a professional standpoint, you were concerned, about, what Beverly had shared with you. Can you let our audience know what profession, you were talking about? Because I think it's important because of some of the false narratives that are out there about homeschooling families, that both of you are actually highly successful professionals coming into homeschooling.
Highly educated.
And highly educated.
Yes, yes. Well, of course, we were not homeschooled, and so we went through the traditional school system. And so my main concern is that if we homeschool them, they would not be able to get into a good college. Okay. And there were some problems in the early years of some of the schools, especially the state universities, not accepting someone who had been homeschooled. They'd have to go back and get a GED degree or something that the state would recognize. Oddly enough, the earliest instance I heard of a homeschooler getting into college, it was Harvard. So the private universities seem to be more amenable to accepting homeschoolers than the state universities were. Because later on, the state universities have followed suit and have pretty well accepted, even the military academies, which I think were the last to go along with it. But so there's not a problem now if you're homeschooling getting your child into college, because universities look, I think, primarily at the SAT scores.
And your profession?
I think you were asking about our educational and professional background. Okay, Kirk is a graduate of Tulane University. I'm a graduate of Stanford University. He has a master's degree in oceanography.
Oceanography, yeah.
And then we both met in law school at the University of San Diego School of Law in our last semester. We took the California bar, then he accepted a job position in Texas. We came to Texas, we took the Texas bar, so we were licensed to practice in 2 states. But I was in my mid-30s at the time, and I said, I have supported myself all my life and had my own career. I would like to stay home, sit on the nest, and have children. And so he said, are you sure you don't want to just practice 1 year of law? I said, not yet. Let's have kids. So he gave me permission to do that, and God blessed us with 4 children. Yes. So he was the practicing attorney of the family.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to let people that are listening to understand and to know, because of this myth about, people that are homeschooling parents are, they're not educated, but these couple are both attorneys, licensed, practicing, successful attorneys, okay? And they chose that. But in state of Texas, state of Texas is highly known as highly protective of homeschooling. So, but I know that it's not without obstacles. I know that you mentioned, but what do you think make it successful, for you that homeschool and for those people that are successfully homeschooling in Texas? How do you think it works, or why is it working for them?
In Texas specifically?
Yes, in the state of Texas specifically.
Well, as you mentioned, Johnson, Texas does not have a restrictive homeschool law.
That's true.
And part of that's just the way the law was written, that there was never any specific mention of homeschooling in the Texas compulsory attendance statute. It talked about private schools, and without specifically saying, well, what is a private school, or does it include homeschools? And so there's never been any history in Texas of the state trying to regulate private schools. And so homeschooling later on was recognized as a form of private school in Texas by a court decision. that came down in the mid-1980s.
That is great.
Both of you have put in the work. You are one of the hardest working families, and a lot of people know you for that. You talked about having 4 children, ages 31 to 38. Will you let the audience know, where are those children today? What are they doing? How is their lives? Did they really turn out okay? Do they have hope that in case they're thinking of the same? And we'll talk about the terrain of homeschooling shortly. But where are they today, and who are they, and what did they do?
We have 3 sons and a daughter. Our 3 sons married, all got engineering degrees, oddly enough. Out of 2 lawyers, we got 3 engineer sons. And our daughter is in public relations and journalism?
Advertising.
Advertising,
Mm-hmm.
okay. We have 7 grandchildren. Everybody is gainfully employed. They're doing fine, and the Lord has really blessed us.
Very good.
The oldest one is in the Foreign Service with the State Department, and he usually is stationed in Africa with one of the U.S. embassies there. He's an IT specialist. The second one works for a government contractor in Corpus Christi. Our daughter is kind of an entrepreneur on her own.
She's a real estate entrepreneur, invests in rental properties, and also is a part-time flight attendant for a number of different charter airlines.
And then our youngest son works for a financial company.
Works for a healthcare consulting company in this
They
area.
are busy, successful
Yeah.
adults.
You know, we are such a strong proponent of virtues, a book of virtues, biblical values, teaching our kids biblical values and stuff. I know that somehow for all these children, those 4 children to have been so highly successful, and you homeschool them, it has to be some values that you instill in them, that you taught them. So can you just share that can you just share some of that with us? How you groomed them to be so highly successful, how the values that you taught them as they were growing up.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, our number one reason for homeschooling was, you might say, the moral and religious
yes.
values, the opportunity to really inculcate those values at a young age, which I think is important. And of course, the education was important as well, but we thought that they would get that at their particular paces. And obviously, our daughter, like a lot of girls, learned quicker than our sons. But our sons caught up later on, so we knew that would probably happen, and that they would be able to be educated. And I think what we encourage them to do is to find their own areas of interest.
That's good. Very
And
good.
I think homeschooling allows them to do that more so than in a regular classroom setting, where they could pursue special projects or spend extra time studying the things they were really interested in.
Yeah. I know that if anybody has had us before, you remember we talked about these things, about what we taught our girls, about being themselves.
Yes.
Being able to choose and pursue, what the purpose,
What they're passionate about.
what they're passionate about. And I just heard Kirk saying the same thing.
Yes.
And whereas you teach your children during their developmental age, right? And then you allow them to build that self-esteem and to be able to aspire to be the best, and so that sky would not even be the limit as to how far they can go.
Very true.
Right? So that's what I get that that from them. That is great.
So one of the key values that families that are listening is, number one, you have to create that time and that environment for your children to be themselves. You guys did that very well. And you were able to pick up on some of the interests that they might have, and you provided all that support, and homeschooling allowed that for them to explore their interests. There was the time into that, and you were there to do that. So it brings us now to the discussion of homeschooling, the terrain of homeschooling, then and now. What are some of your thoughts? the terrain of homeschooling, just because I think it's necessary for our viewers to know. Those that are homeschooling, maybe they started homeschooling 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or maybe they're about to dive into it, and maybe what you've shared might be foreign to a lot of homeschooling families. So let's talk about homeschooling then and now. What are your thoughts as pioneers, and how will you guide or help those that are currently homeschooling, those that are thinking about it? So just take your time, answering, because it's a lengthy question, of course.
Well, there have been many changes in the last 35 years, really, that we've been involved. And the issues that are going on now are totally different. Back when we started in 1982, we were surprised to learn that the state of Texas had taken a position, a relatively recent position, that homeschooling was not legal unless one of the parents was a certified teacher. So we said, well, we better check into that and see what's going on. It turned out there was no such law, but the Texas Education Agency had come out with that as a pronouncement, and so a lot of homeschoolers were being prosecuted.
Wow.
At that time.
Wow.
A lot.
And most of them really didn't go very far. They got settled at the lower courts, but a lot of homeschoolers were frightened of the knock at the door from the local truant officer. So, of course, it may take a while to explain all this, but a few years later, in 1985, a group of homeschoolers got together with a prominent attorney who was skilled in constitutional law cases, and they filed a lawsuit against all the school districts in the state of Texas, asking the court to, in essence, declare that homeschooling was a private school and was legal. So that case made its way through the courts, and the court agreed that yes, homeschooling is a form of private schooling if it includes the basic academic subjects. And the state has to have some way of checking to see that there's some education going on. And so there was some issues involved there, but the final decision that came down was a 99% victory for homeschooling, because the court basically says as long as you're teaching the basic academic subjects and a study of good citizenship, which was specifically in the Texas statute, then you're okay. And so you could make up your own curriculum, you could buy a canned curriculum, whatever, as long as you didn't abuse the privilege. And of course, most homeschoolers that we knew were not. And most of them were doing it because they wanted to, and it was a big sacrifice for most families to do it. So that was mid-1980s, basically.
Okay, I think you wanted to hear how homeschooling now has changed from homeschooling then.
Yeah, because Koch gave us the foundation of
Yes.
then.
Yeah,
So
then
now,
how it transitioned to
how
what
it
we have
transitioned
now.
to where we are now.
Then we were homeschooling underground. We didn't let our kids outside during school hours. We were careful not to go to the mall or the grocery store during school hours, because we would be asked, why aren't your kids in school? And so we were intimidated by all the truancy arrests that were going on. There were probably almost 36 truancy arrests around the state. So after we had to really battle for the right, for people to recognize that homeschooling was legal. So those of us whom the Lord called to do it, and they primarily were very committed Christians, were willing to sacrifice and risk certain things to gain the right to homeschool. And not only were we trying to figure out how to homeschool our kids, because there was nobody to show us how, and there was no curriculum, but we were also having a legal and political battle with the Texas legislature and the TEA and the court system.
Wow.
So the early pioneers were warriors.
Yes.
Yes.
After our big victory in 1986, or 91, I think, when the Texas Supreme Court, 91 or 92.
The final appeal was finally heard in 1991. Right.
Where it was clearly recognized that parents had the right to homeschool, the pressure was off, And by that time, 15 years had passed, and there was more curriculum available. Because classroom curriculum that's supposed to be used for 30 to 45 kids is not something you use at home, which is more of a tutorial system, one-on-one, two-on-one. And so it took a while for curriculum to change and be adapted to homeschooling, and it got easier. And once homeschooling got easier, we saw a different problem entering the homeschool movement, the easy homeschooling in a box. We saw an attitude in many parents that was not as self-sacrificing as the original pioneers. They wanted to find a co-op to just drop them off so they could go shop or do something else. And some of the co-op directors were telling me that the children's math scores were not as high as the first generation. So that was disturbing to see that trend. On the other hand, I would venture to say that probably 10% of today's homeschoolers that I've met have a deep conviction, just as strong as the pioneers did, that they are raising the children for the Lord. They want them to have strong biblical values, a strong sense that yes, they are their brother's keeper. They need to give back to the community. They need to set a good example. They need to be, working in the church. And so, yes, we still have the pioneer spirit, although it's not in all families now that are homeschooling.
Wow. I know that we have so much to talk about, and I don't want us to leave without you talking about, those people that that can help, especially the listeners, those the support groups, the organization like Texas Homeschool Coalition, and please share with us about book fairs, homeschool book fairs, because that is something that we enjoyed this so much during the years that we were homeschooling. When it comes to selection of curriculums, buying books, and doing all of those things that will prepare you to be successful homeschoolers or homeschooling parents. Tell us about the book fair, please.
Okay, you have a long list of things to talk about. So, which topic you want me to tackle first?
I want you just to tell us, the importance of the book fair, and where your book fair program is today, and how people can tap into those resources.
Okay, in 1984, those of us who were homeschooling underground were having great difficulty finding appropriate teaching materials, and most of us wound up making our own things. And I thought, if I'm having this trouble, everyone else surely is. And I said, why not gather gather the publishers and curriculum producers and have them in one place come and bring their curriculum, even though it's not homeschool oriented, it's classroom oriented, but at least we'll have a start with something to buy. So we started the first homeschool book fair at the Richardson Civic Center in 1985. 4 years later, we had outgrown it because the first year, homeschooling was underground and 1,400 homeschoolers showed up. And we were blown away because we didn't know there were so many homeschoolers underground. There were no support groups yet. We were shocked and thrilled and surprised. And from that sprang the support groups and the associations and the umbrella schools later. But after 4 years, we did outgrow the Richardson Civic Center. We moved it to the Arlington Convention Center, where it remained for the next 26 years. And about the 30th year of the Homeschool Book Fair, the Lord kind of indicated to us it was time to retire our book fair. And we invited our state organization, the Texas Homeschool Coalition, to step into our place and bring their own convention to North Texas. So they did. And they have continued the tradition of providing the best curriculum available to homeschoolers, godly curriculum, workshops on how to homeschool, lots of special events for moms, dads. It's an excellent event, so we strongly recommend that convention at the Arlington Convention Center especially.
And I think for any homeschoolers out there interested in resources of any kind, the Texas Homeschool Coalition is the place
Great.
to look, and it's thsc.org.
Okay.
Very good.
Another sad development is that support groups are no longer as strong and vibrant as they once were. People find more online now, so there's less need for finding out from fellow homeschoolers, and there are lots of co-ops and umbrella schools. So really the best source of information is the Texas Homeschool Coalition for finding out what's going on in Texas. They have a wonderful newsletter and they have all kinds of events.
Okay, great. Good.
Wow, what a great time we've had with the pioneers of the homeschool movement. We always say that our time goes by so fast when we're having a great time, and of course you've gleaned from their wisdom. The key thing that you want to know, whether you're currently homeschooling or whether you desire to homeschool, is to connect with Texas Homeschool Coalition. They're a strong organization led by two amazing people, Tim and Lindsay Lambert. You will love what they do. Register for that book fair that is coming up. Ask questions, and no matter what, you know that you can do this because God has called you to it.
Sweetheart, the audience out there, you've not seen the last of this couple. Can we bring them back to the next episode?
Yes, let's do that.
We want more of this. We want more out of these couples. We want to glean more out of their wisdom, because they're just, they're strong, solid, solid individuals and couple that, we need to bring them back to the next episode so that they can even just feel free to share and just to advise and just to counsel and just whatever the Lord lead them to do. So we're bringing them back to the next episode. So we are encouraging you, not just only the homeschoolers, but those people that want the best for their children, that want to train their children in biblical ways, in biblical principles, and want them to be the best that God has called them to be. We want you to join us next time. And then for all those people, even for those people that are not even yet married, but are desiring the best for their family, please join us. And then until we meet again, that's what we always do on this channel, and that's what we always do in Oasis Connection, is sharing biblical principles, real life issues, and talk. And if you have an idea, you just say, you know what, I want you guys to talk about something. Feel free to do that. Join us on Facebook, on Twitter, or on our site, Oasis Connection or Oasis Focus Inc. And until next time, when we meet again, sweetheart, say
God bless
bye-bye,
you. We
and
love
God
you.
bless.
God bless you.